Hi, this is Bob Lawless from Fairbury, Illinois. Today I'm over at Pontiac at Precision Planting. This particular trial, it's got golden harvest corn in here, but it's a planting date trial. We do similar things with our agronomy research, but this is just kind of in a condensed scale over here. They try to hit about every week, as weather allows to come over here. So they started planting. This behind me was planted April 4th. Right now we're at July 8th, so that many months later. So you can kind of see emerge. You can see we're already at pollination time on this, and then each week it goes down from there to very small corn at the other end that hasn't been planted all that long. So what they're going to do is we'll take this to yield, see how things progress as the season goes on. So when we get to this stage, when we're at pollination time, we've started the pollination process. So what you might want to do at this time is just kind of check, see how pollination's coming along. So one way to do that is to pick it. I like to cut them just because it makes it easier to peel it back, because you want to carefully peel back the shucks off of it. Helps to cut the bottom off there and kind of expose that ear in there without manually knocking the silks off. Once you've done that, you can see some of these fall off. You can kind of give it a little shake. So this one's not very far along pollinating. It's a little bit on this one side more than the other, which is typical. Usually the top side will get pollinated a little quicker. So this one's just starting the pollination process. Most of these are not pollinated yet. We've had plenty of moisture here lately. Some parts of the country haven't. One thing to get concerned on with silk clippers, if you've been drought stressed especially, that plant will only throw maybe 1/2 inch of silks a day if you're under drought stress. I've seen it with plenty of moisture throw 1.5 inches of silk. So you can almost outgrow the silk clippers if you've had enough moisture and that plant's actively growing. So once that pollen has intercepted the silk, very rapidly moves down, pollinates, and then the silk disconnects from the ear. So you can also start to count at some point how many rows around we have. But we'll wait a little bit till we get more pollination done on this, see how good we fill the tip out initially. Here they've used some golden harvest beans, and what they've done is a planting date study. So he tries to plant approximately every week, as weather allows. Started out March 10th with his earliest planting, so he was in way ahead of the frost there. And this is all conventional tillage, so we didn't get dinged with frost here like we did in some of the no-till stuff. And then he goes all the way out into June plantings at the other end, fairly recently. They're very, very small beans down there. Makes a nice visual, and you can see the benefits. The biggest thing we see, for instance, here is the March 10th, the earliest planting. And we always see this, you get a ton of branching when you get this early planting. That allows that to get out, put more nodes. Each of these nodes is where you can flower, where you can potentially have pods and potentially have beans. So that's where your yield comes from on beans. As you move later, I think this was mid-May on these, you can see there's not a lot of branching to these. They're starting to just barely set some setting some nodes along there, but not flowering very good. We're well along on that early planting. That's what's helping us there. And then you get into the what would be like double crop beans into the June. This wasn't the latest, but very small. That's why your really late planted beans generally going to be shorter. So back to putting this early ones in. It's all about building a factory out here. And beans, since they're indeterminate, they will continue to set flowers and nodes throughout the growing season, even as they're gone into reproductive stage. So we want to get as much done to this and as much flowering and have the longest reproductive period that we can with soybeans. And by that, there's no substitute for early planting. You can't ever catch up with late planting to what the early planting was for setting nodes, because these will keep setting nodes as the new ones do too, so they never catch up. This branching is the money shot here. I mean, as we start to see all these flowers on these branches, when you're not just up the main node, you're starting to set a lot of beans on that. If you can keep that bean well fed and protect it, with some foliar products, keeping insects off of it, disease off of it, you can set yourself up for some really high yield potential. So I'm a big fan of the early planting. Not as big a fan of ultra early planting. You don't need to be out there in February, because realistically the difference between, you know, early March planting and early April is not that much, because the beans don't come up right away. Bob Lawless from Pontiac, Illinois.